podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Peace. This is The Good Brothers with myself, Justice Rajee. I'm Majestic. And joining us in a special first time as in this capacity, the Black Man Green Plan himself, my brother Knowledge Vine. Peace.
Hey, peace. Good evening.
Peace.
All right, so the topic for tonight I wanted to do was jump into in the last week and then just I guess yesterday, Bill Withers passed away. Ellis Marsalis passed away, and in the midst of that, we had a couple other things happening with DJs playing music and things on the internet in the midst of our particular crisis. So I wanted to just see if we could talk about those two and also music in a broader sense, and its impact on people and how they see the world or how they experience the world. So I didn't have a real formal setup question or structure, but I guess what struck you, and either one of y'all can go, when you first saw that Bill Withers had passed away? What was something that popped into your mind?
Well, I'll start because I know Niles Devine, has some really good things to share. So, I mean, for me, a couple things I thought about with him. I mean, one, you have the story of Bill Withers, right? And you have that whole story of like a person not becoming an actual artist until like age 32, which is one component of like something that's really interesting. Two, that essentially he was doing like folk music, and he turned folk music into becoming really popular music in the Black context, which we don't often think about. I mean, we could argue blues is folk; it's the original American folk music. But when we think about R&B and soul and those things, we often don't frame it as, folk music, where the way he did his music with the guitar and everything was like clearly folk music, which the third part of that reminds me of like what it means to be Black in Appalachia. You know what I mean? Like, what it mean to be Black from West Virginia. Because if you're not close to West Virginia, a lot of people don't think that there's Black folks in West Virginia. But as somebody that's close to West Virginia, there's Black folks in West Virginia. A not small percentage of them are in West Virginia, right?
There's a lot of Black folks from West Virginia.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
part of my family's from West Virginia.
That's what I'm saying. So there's a lot of people who don't think there's Black people in West Virginia. So you get this whole kind of culture itself that he brought to the music. And the final thing I'll say is to put it in the context of him and the Black Godfather, Clarence Avant, being, him being on Sussex Records and being the first big hit on Sussex Records and being on a Black-owned label during that time, and the revolutionary element of that being a Black-owned label, to do that. So that's really kind of what I've been thinking about and listening to some more of his music today. My favorite song of his is "Can We Pretend," just because of the pain and the stuff that's in the songs. You know what I mean? So he was making real music, and I listened also to him on soul, on Soul TV, which was him talking about his music and how he said he didn't want to say he loved you and put his hands up in a V sign every time. He said he loved you, like many of the, like many of the artists of that time. He said, "I'm not gonna not putting my hands up like a V sign every time, man. I say I love you." You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of like what Bill Withers kind of brought, like a no nonsense ethic and no nonsense element to music and really doing successful black folk music.
All right. Now, Zavon, you got a thought you'd like to open up with?
The thing that I thought about when I heard of the great brother's untimely demise this morning was I immediately thought West Virginia's finest has left the building. I can't think of too many things that West Virginia should be proud of.
Don't start this shit, man. It's not a moment in West Virginia, man. Don't start, you're not.
Yo, I'm just saying the one shining example of West Virginia I've always had has been Bill Withers.
Man, Randy Moss from West Virginia too.
So, like I was saying,
Henry Louis Gates Jr.
I can who?
Henry Louis Gates in them Jr.
So, like I was saying, I was like, man, West Virginia's finest has left the building, and I then went to go because I wanted to listen to like one of his happy songs, but the beautiful thing about Bill Withers is his art was also about making beauty out of a sad moment, right? And so I went back and listened to Rosie, which Kanye West sampled, to make a song about, his ailing grandmother. But just listening to Rosie is like this is a love song, but it's sad, but it's beautiful, right? And not everybody can pull that off. And the brother didn't have a whole bunch of sound effects and extra instruments. A lot of times it was just him and his guitar. And how much I appreciated that over the years. I've kind of taken for granted that Bill Withers is just one of those people who will always be around. But reviewing his larger body of work, Majestic made a good point about how unique it was for a black folk singer to become a pop artist. And me and Majestic have had a multiplicity of conversations about the connection of blues to all other forms of American music. So in some ways, I still consider Brother Bill Withers as a modern day blues singer. Somebody who transformed the blues into another form of music, whether, we call it folk music, but really all those are just expressions of different variations of blues. And, just how funky the brother kept it his whole life. I remember a few years ago, his daughter put out a documentary about him because he never really wanted the limelight. And so, it just showed him going through the motions of kind of reclaiming and reestablishing his career. And, unfortunately, the great brother ran out of time. However, he's left a beautiful catalog of work for future human beings to appreciate. And so I'll forever be glad because of that.
I want to say something. It's divine in the way that only you can say things. You made a really good point about that continuation of it, right? So he did blues, but instead of it going to rhythm and blues, he kept it with like a guitar, right? So it stayed really acoustic, right? And when even the blues transitioned, whether it was the blues to rock and roll or the blues to rhythm and blues, or then the blues to what we kind of generally call soul music, which is kind of the broadest way possible, right? He kept it with this real acoustic sound that still told the same stories that blues singers would tell. Whereas, again, like he said later, people start putting their arms up in a V motion and tell you, I love you, right? So it started adding in dancing and it started adding all this other stuff versus kind of like that, hey, man, I'm going through this with my girlfriend. She might leave me. This is what's going on. And then I think about his most popular song. Well, one could argue probably his most commercially viable song being Just the Two of Us, right? And Just the Two of Us was a person who did music his own way with a artist who did music his own way in Grover Washington Jr. But again, at that time, they started doing music that was able to be more palatable to a broader audience, right? So they both did music that we just kind of take as like, oh, that's a good R&B song versus like, no, these are two titans of their particular kinds of forms of music that at the not the end of their careers, more towards the end of Bill Withers' career than I would say the end of Grover Washington's career. But it was when they did music that was able to be kind of received by the masses of people. So,
Yeah. I think that was a particular thing that struck me about Bill Withers. I mean, outside of the music, was his approach to things. It appeared as if, I mean, one, as you stated earlier, he's the one that became, you know, popular. You know, they say famous once he was like grown. You know what I mean? He was like, he had worked jobs. You know what I'm saying? He was like a mechanic. You know, he worked in factories and all kinds of stuff. You know, was in the service. And then, you know, actually, I just listened to, which I'm gonna have the link in the notes. I don't know if this is one of the last interviews of him, but it was an interview in 2015 at WNYC Studios on the Death, Sex, and Money show. But you know, he basically was like, you know, I decided I wanted to try to do this. You know, after seeing, you know, after doing some practicing or whatever and learning how to play, and he went after it. You know, but he didn't want to be. You know, I don't want to misquote him, but sort of faking like he wasn't really, basically saying if you're gonna try to be a musician, you got to really go try and be a musician. You can't like humble bumble your way into it. But also, once he started doing what he was doing, when he felt he hit the peak of what he needed to do, he's like, all right, y'all got it. I'm a I'm gonna pull away. I'm gonna go over here. Nobody want to hear what I'm an old man now. Nobody want to hear what I got to say necessarily. Which I think is a attitude around anything that one would do, and a sensibility that is, it definitely is not the common refrain or position of someone that is like a famous in any, you know, creative genre. It's sort of like, you know, he obviously did not feel the need to maintain that public persona, so to speak, or that place in people's ideas and minds. But I think for me, some of that is grounded in when he became famous. You know, if you become famous, you know, with 21, 22, while your brain is still developing, you might think you always need to have that feeling to exist. You know what I mean? Where he was like, well, I've clearly lived a life already, so I'm gonna go be a musician like professionally now. And, you know, he achieved what he achieved, and gave us, you know, the contributions that he gave us. And the thing I always liked about his music, is he had a very like masculine, manly sensibility, but it wasn't like overbearing or like braggadocious, but it was clearly like, this is how I get down. Like I move like this. You know what I mean? There's a familiarity that I had, at least, or felt to the way he approached things. And then that finding some joy in sad things, you know, but also I think a level of honesty uh about what life, you know, how life really go for people, you know, and and I don't know if just getting to music when he did, and becoming, you know, the kind of the way he generated, you know, the material that he generated, created that space, you know, or if it was, you know, if it's something else. But I think it's a remarkable contribution creatively. So the song that always sticks out to me, and that is a couple of them, but one is Grandma's Hands, and even Ain't No Sunshine when he's gone, which that always made me a little bit too sad. I was like, man, this shit's fucked up, man. Like, I was like, what Bill gonna do to himself, man? Because, you know, yeah, just bumped that. I'm like, man, Bill in a bad place. Like, you know,
well, and it didn't
going
make
through it.
sense. And that's the thing. It didn't make sense in the context of the music when you're hearing it later, right? it's kind of like stands out. Like they're amazing songs, but then you listen to like this other computer like driven song. And then hear Bill Withers, you like, man, that's just depressing, man. Like, we ain't no more instruments in here, right? Like, like you needed some more instrumentation. You know what I mean? Which also goes to show about how our ears are kind of framed early around what music should sound like without having a broader view. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think now I was thinking about. I mean, because that definitely landed in that as my mother referred to all that sad ass music, like the Shy Lights, the Delphonics, what's some of them other late '60s, early '70s.
Oh man,
like,
Blue Magic, come on!
Like, yeah, I'm saying like brothers at a bad spot. You know what I mean? But also I was
My old lady left me, man.
That's right. That's right.
Lady
Blue Note.
what you think I'm supposed to sing about? I'm gonna sing about this pain in my heart.
Because my old lady going, I know I messed up. My old lady going, man. I put my hands up in the air with a V.
But you know what? Justice, I don't mean to interrupt your thought.
Go ahead, God.
The thing about that though is the fact that it's in some ways it is sad, but in other ways, there's often talk about the toxic masculinity, right? And so I guess in some ways musically, the toxic masculinity starts after brothers stop singing about being in love and stop singing about the pain in their heart and start talking about, I'm gonna smack the bitch. You know what I'm saying? Because that whole I'm gonna smack the bitch energy could not was not put on record as frequently when the popular culture wanted to hear about how sad this man was that his lady left him. So
indeed. Well, it's interesting. I think in the either the New York Times or one of the pieces, there's a quote from him about that song, because that's a song that he became, I guess, like popular before Use Me and Lean on Me. But he's like, yeah, I probably came up with it with somebody, some girl broke my heart or something, but I ain't really want to say it. You know what I'm saying? So he just, he just started doing the song to deal with the feeling and the emotion. You know what I mean? And I think that is actually, I would say at this modern age is sort of a problematic nature of a lot of dudes where they act, I have a creative thing I've been working on, and I'm gonna stop beating around the bush and release. Because I think it's a lot of dudes, they run around here with their heart broke and they don't want to say it. So they be like, man, women, they be tripping. They be like, man, just admit who broke your heart, man. It's all right to get your heart broke. Everybody loves somebody once and, it ain't work out.
But matter of fact, listen to Heartbreak Road by Bill Withers. It's a whole song about it. Like to hear it, here it go.
I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, that's a broader, kind of context of like what is allowable within the parameters of Black manhood to talk about, right? And once hip hop kind of created this whole nother space to talk about, because in some ways hip hop, it was like, okay, you're going to talk about going to a party. Like when Luther Vandross, like what does Luther Vandross talk about? We're having a party, about to go to a party. Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Never too much. Like you can't never party too much. We're going to put our stuff on for the weekend, right? And music between like 1982 and like 1985 was like devoid of all purpose. Like every song was about going to a party or, you know what I mean? So hip hop comes in with this whole other host of things to talk about, which on one level is amazing and was missing from music. But on the flip side of that, it also, you get the birth of generations of people who, it's not that they've, and I'm past this whole thing that your father wasn't there. It's not necessarily that your father wasn't there. It's that whatever the value systems were that were talking about being transferred in a community no longer became the prominent thing that you spoke on. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's because these guys, they had their fathers, and maybe their fathers worked real long, or maybe, various things. So it's not just that person wasn't present, nor does it infer that the women or the extended family of men in that young man's life didn't transfer the values. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it just became obviously those values were not preeminent, and it kind of mirrored the larger kind of American context when like Kiss comes on and they look like the Road Warriors and Ozzy Osbourne's
Right.
biting a bat. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I think you'd be acting like this stuff happened in it happened in a bubble. Like, no, what you start hearing from rappers wasn't in a bubble. It was because of all this other crazy ass shit that was going on in society generally.
Yeah, and Melly Mel and Furious 5 was dressing like those same rock stars too. So that's part of the story that I think, you know, not a lot of, well, I think some of the fashion documentaries have spoken on, like Fresh Dressed, but there was a general shift to like, no, we want the music to sound like how life is outside right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's who was producing
it. Right, and moving away from just sort of the I mean, I guess even you could say the formality or the form of, you know, like you wanted to, if you was in the music and you was popular music, you was like, I'm not a dude in a suit. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a slick individual. I'm up in here like I'm about to yell and thrust my hips. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's gonna be a lot of hip thrusting. You know what I'm saying? And somebody's gonna hit the drums hard, and somebody gonna throw their bra on stage because that's what this is about. You know what I mean? This ain't about a staid show of you know like highbrow creativity, like, you know what I mean? And I wonder sometimes, even for somebody like Bill Withers, if like especially once he kind of hit the success of just the two of us, he's like, well, looks like people on some other shit. I'm gonna fall back.
Right.
like they got on like cut off t-shirts and stuff and like chains and shit. Like, I ain't put on no chains. Look at my afro, man. I'm from Slab Fork, West Virginia. Like, yeah, I mean, I can't wear that.
Well, that's when the music industry just requested different things of people. And to your point, I think also that's where the power of Run DMC, frankly, came in as like, because even Curtis Blow was getting dressed up, right? Curtis Blow had his shirt open, you know what I mean? Had a jerry curl, had his gold chains. Like, Curtis Blow looked like a stylish person of those times, right? Run DMC was a total antithesis of that. They looked like dudes that sold drugs. You see what I'm saying? Like, they looked like that. And I think that was a huge difference. And I mean, it a testament to Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin and them, that they really took a look and said, you know what, we're just going to have somebody reflect reality.
Yeah.
And then people chose it over
the other thing.
Over the other thing. You know what I mean? I mean, the R&B guys still look dressed like that, right? Generally speaking. Well, the Whispers, but even Guy, right? Like, I just saw a picture of Guy in like 88, 89. Like, look at the I'll Be Sure album covers. They still dress like the slick people of their time.
Yeah.
But the rappers didn't. And it wasn't really until Jodeci where the R&B guys started dressing like rappers. Which, I don't know, another story, but yeah.
So I had a thought about, now I don't know, all right, so I remember hearing Use Me Up, Use Me, before I had enough information about, the dynamics of relationships to fully interpret exactly what could have been going on in their relationship. Mm-hmm. But I had a sincere understanding that, like, if it feel this good being used, just keep it on.
That's right.
I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, how the hell did I figure that out? And then, and I just wondered if anybody else had any other thoughts, because I mean, I definitely heard that before I had a deeper understanding of how all this stuff works in terms of, the male, female, whatever, however you show up to the party, coming together around your, emotions and feelings and such. But, and the potential concept of what it could mean for somebody to be like, hey, man, y'all don't know what this feel like. I'm good. I'm gonna ride this thing out.
Again, I think it's like one of those, like, for me, I kind of got that through them like songs like Frederick, like Calling Your Name, like I don't want to ever stop loving you, girl. Don't you ever stop being my world. Like I say, damn, she his world. You know what I mean? Don't you ever stop bringing me joy. I don't want to ever like, oh damn, hold up, man. This is about to take this to another level, dog. Like, you know, you just had some visions in your head as a kid, like somebody gonna bring me joy. I can't wait.
What's she gonna do to me?
What you got? What man? What in the Lisa and Cold Jam is this, man? Like, I wonder if I take you home. Will you still be in love? Because I need it tonight. Man, hold on, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I find these days they just go straight to like discussing the act, which just ain't the same. It's like, come on, man, you messing it all up, man. Like,
come on, man. We're in a time everybody want what they want right now. Listen,
yeah, but I don't think they know what they.
You couldn't convince motherfuckers to stay in the house because they had to be outside. Like, you had a whole global pandemic. And motherfuckers, man, I ain't staying in the house if I ain't got to. Motherfuckers don't want the long way around, man. They want diameter. They don't want no circumference. Come on, man. Circumference. Yeah, I mean, listen, like you said, the music is not made for anything but let's do it right now. Like, you want to get high? Let's get high right now. Not talking about, hey, man, we had a party at the end of the party. You know what I mean? Like, not even the Rick James kind of getting high. Like, this, like, just get real high right now. I was listening to Pop Smoke, right? And he was like, off the Xannies and perks, so I'm feeling retarded. And I said, damn. Like, who just says it goes right to it? Like, I'm off these drugs, so I'm feeling retarded. One is not, you can't even say that stuff no more. But two, like, you just got right to it. Like, but you know, again, we're in delayed gratification ain't our thing. Let's just say that.
I feel you. Before I want to pivot to Ellis Marsalis and then loop back. But before I do that, Knowledge Divine, did you have something you wanted to add?
I mean, a lot has been said to honor the brother's dubious career. I just hope, you know, artists take a time to pay homage to his career and sort of go back and listen to his catalog as we're in a sample centric digital music world, that this gentleman made an entire body of music pretty much with a guitar and his voice. And you know, it kind of reminds me of that song, I'm forgetting her name right now, but you know, can it be that it was all so simple then? And in some ways, his career was almost like a reminder of a simpler time. So that's all I have to say.
All right. So the angle I came in and thinking about Ellis Marsalis, is, I mean, obviously for me, I'm more familiar with his sons, right, than his, you know, him as a recording artist or him as a creator. And then, you know, knowing that, or, you know, hearing different things over the years from his sons talking about their dad, you know, teaching them music and kind of that being their root. And then upon other study, seeing the number of musicians, especially in jazz of the last, I guess say 20 to 30 years, you know, the Young Lions and all that they basically like, yeah, he told us how to play. You know, if you was out in New Orleans, he the one taught us how to play, do the music stuff, and you know, it's all praise due to him. Thinking about like what in your mind or any thoughts do you have, like sort of the impact of someone's intentionality around teaching, you know, within music, that you think maybe, you know, goes missed or goes unnoticed? Like, how do we do a better job of sort of getting the story of someone like him before we have to read his obituary?
I think so, because I was thinking about this because there was a couple other So there was another brother out of New Orleans that died a day before him. I think his name was like Wallace Roney. And then you had Mano Dibango who died, who did Soul Makossa um, early that week, all from COVID-19, right? And you think about this idea of mentorship, and I think now, Devon, you can especially speak to this as being trained and taught an instrument. That again, with our music shifting, that's something that, except in certain cities in America, New Orleans being one of them, is becoming a lost art, right? Because if you don't have that many kids playing instruments, you don't have that mentorship and that tutorial and that teaching process that is so vital when you're learning an instrument, when you're learning certain kind of music. You know what I mean? Somebody teaching you beats is going to be different than someone that's teaching you the trombone or teaching you composition, right? And I think again, I had the benefit of reading Christian McBride and his testimony to McCoy Tyner, who returned a couple weeks ago, and he talked about the people who taught him learned from McCoy Tyner. So you have this kind of respect for the cycle when you're playing instruments. And again, it's something that's often being lost because you don't have that level of someone taking time and teaching. But I think New Orleans sticks out because, you know, even though when it makes you sad, you can be on Bourbon Street and it's a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old that's playing the drums in an amazing way, and they're being taught by like a 15-year-old, right? So the level of tutelage and being taught in New Orleans as far as music culture is probably different than any other city in America right now amongst Black folks, just because it's one of the last cities that's still playing music. And I think for me, Ellis Marsalis is the representation of that idea of like the patriarch, frankly, of an entire city, an entire generation. And it's also there's this complexity that comes with New Orleans, right? Because at the same time we're championing that kind of stuff, thousands of people or hundreds of people, largely African American, largely Black folks, largely Black men, are dying because of COVID, because of the health disparity. So that's a story for another day. But I do think it's a unique story to New Orleans in this day and time. Black Man Green Plan.
Well, as somebody who began playing an instrument in 1991, the Marsalis brand to me as an 11-year-old playing saxophone was similar to in a positive way, similar to the Kardashian family almost in popularity in music, because it was like whatever CD that I picked up from the library that had the Marsalis name was thorough. The instrumentation, the creativity, the improvisation was on point. And to know that all emanated from their father is just adds to almost the legend. Black America has had a history of families that were musical. However, most of those families were musical in a singing way. And it's not so often that you hear an entire family of jazz musicians. And I think what Majestic said was absolutely correct, that's the kind of thing that you still have in a city like New Orleans, where instrumentation is still a pivotal thing. And to another point that Majestic raised, I went to the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music for about 4 years. And every Saturday, and sometimes during the week, a senior member of the jazz community, Mr. Berkeley Fudge, took time out of his day to meet me at the Conservatory of Music at 10 a.m. for 4 years. And for 4 years, every Saturday, I was with this man in his 60s playing scales, playing the notes of chords, playing melodies, and experimenting with improvising. And I probably sounded horrible, but he was there to support me and to tell me try again and to give me examples to study and to boost my confidence. And I think about every time I came home, my friends wanted to play basketball and was kind of like, "Man, where you was at? Oh, you was taking your little music class. Come on and get your head bust," you know. But they respected that, you know, every Saturday morning, fam is going to the music class. And I think about what my friends got into in those 2 hours that I was at music class and how that probably prevented me from getting into some stuff that is potentially deadly. So, the importance of mentors in the music sense is huge because the other thing is jazz is one of those forms of music that most people aren't just going to pick up and be able to play. You need somebody to show you the structure, show you how you get the chords or the scales or the melody to sound a certain way, or how you get the rhythm to come off a certain way, because it's not your traditional way of thinking in music. It's almost flipping music inside out. So, shout out to all of the young musicians practicing their scales, making weird noises with their instrument because they're just figuring out that they can make those noises, and all the parents that deal with the noise and having to pick up and drop their kids off to a music class or to a concert or all that. Shout out to all of them, and shout out to the instructors. Shout out to those patient musicians who take their time to give back to young people who want to learn the art and skill of music.
Oh, it makes me think about I mean, in this time, even for us, as I like to say, as a retired rapper, um, who likes to play his drum, and I play a beatty bow, and I have a bass guitar that I practice from time to time that I need to practice more. Um, there is something that I think, unfortunately for a lot of us, was lost as the access to music became either very defined by, like, you in the church, so you get to learn how to play instruments, or you are from a family where you have someone who's an accomplished musician so they can teach you, right? But if you don't really have that, you may not learn. You may learn to understand music and rhythm and sound from an experiential model, but maybe not from a practicing and from having a relationship where you go and with someone seasoned and skilled, and I don't know, that was every once a week or every week, you know go kind of get that time of learning. um it's something I think that is remarkable, and that something Gino, go flip side, once told me, from his experience in the recording industry, was the amount of super talented, skilled people that are behind very popular people, right? So people we know and they're super popular, and oh man, that person. But then there's like this other dude, he's not as popular, but that's the dude that's writing these songs or arranging the original structure and composition, and then that person, they give that person the rest of it and they do some other things with it, right? But almost that the deep mastery of things is, I'm not gonna say it was more common. I think it may have more been a circumstance of what the vehicles for entertainment were for people and families in previous ages, more so than a high level of intention. But it is still something that is different than our time. If you have somebody with a piano in their house, more than likely they they're a piano person. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a casual instrument that one just has. I mean, I can't think of anybody who I casually just run into, like, oh yeah, I happen to have a saxophone. I toot a little. Usually they, like, at some point, I had saxophone in elementary, or I used to play and then I stopped playing, and after high school. But rarely is it just like, we just happen to have instruments and we just happen to play them. You know what I mean? It's sort of like a very intentional situation. So with that, what do you think is, either one, Majestic, you or Knowledge. Is there a pathway to getting more folks into instruments or just music? That isn't music in a performative, social sense. Like, is there a road back to that or a road to that expanded? Do you think?
I would say there is. Um, I think access to computer music has leveled the playing field. However, the ease of access to computer music does not necessarily involve the access to a physical instrument. And so I think something that would be fair is some sort of entity that could listen to a young person's production of music and take into consideration what instruments would help this young person further the musical production that they're already making. Maybe all their drum patterns and their chords on their organ or their piano that they're playing or the keyboard sound, all of that's great, but maybe their bass line is lacking, right? Well, maybe that young person needs to take the bass so they can learn the different change ups that a bass player can bring to that underside of the melody. Um, I also think that the context of what jazz is and what blues is needs to be changed. And I think the trifecta of gospel, blues, and jazz are the three African American or black classical musics that
Mm-hmm.
basically we created sheerly from imagination and certain our conditions. And they have to be recognized not just as genres of music, but forms of classical music.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think acknowledging that, and the challenge is, I don't know, and this is one of those broad how black people say white people things. you know, Even though you're not talking about every white person, but you say it like that. I think white folks acknowledge what jazz is and what blues is, and to maybe less gospel. I think black folks don't necessarily see those as our classical musics.
That's what I meant. I
Oh,
meant
okay.
as far as young black children being told that there's these musical forms called jazz or blues and not being told like jazz and blues are African American classical musics.
Oh yeah, I agree. Right, and nor being framed like they're just either old music and music from your uncle that's an alcoholic, or from your stuffy uncle that comes to the house who don't want to like be cool and listen to this R&B or this hip hop. Right,
Mm-hmm.
like that's another framework that we've been given or we've given ourselves for these great musics that they're musics of the past, which speaks to how in some senses black folks we're amazingly disposable until we pick up stuff 20 years later,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
we'll let it go and then pick it back up, then let it go and pick it back up and let it go and pick it back up, you know what I mean? um yeah.
Because I would I think as I like to, as I said in many a time, like the children's music to me is whatever DAS was playing from 1976 to 1983, right? Because that, in my mind, that's the stuff I would sing along to in the car. That's the stuff that was playing in the background, at incidental functions. So some of those songs, some of that music has a certain place for me, and uh, other music like my mom wasn't big gospel person, uh, but you know, every once in a while we listen to hear some Mahalia Jackson playing, or what's the other one? There's a whole slew of artists I don't know all like that, but I've come to realize that my grandma used to be playing that. I didn't know what it was. I think that there's a change in akin to that, into that sometimes, weirdly enough, older folks feeling compelled to play what younger folks are playing in like a
Mm-hmm.
way that I don't totally jive with. I'd be like, look, man, you don't have to like it. You don't got to judge it negatively either, but you ain't got to act like it's your jam. Like you can just be you. Um, but something I see sometimes I feel is a way people feel like they're connecting with young people is by like embracing their songs or newer songs in a way that I struggle to think that they actually like it the same way that the young people like it. I don't know. I feel like there was a comfortability that I experienced growing up of like, like my mom might like a couple joints that I played. Like, oh, that's kind of nice. But the other ones be like, I ain't ready. That's you. Go do go do your thing. You know what I mean? And um, I would like to see. I think it's especially in this time. I mean, I think this is a great window for some folks, especially if you got any of them streaming services. Man, make each other listen to each other's music. You know what I'm saying? Like, put on something your peoples would like. You know what I mean? That you maybe wouldn't traditionally listen to because you're probably in the house. Um, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think again, what I'll say is, I think that's to we have generations where now you got grandmoms and grandfathers, not just even that didn't listen to jazz or funk or stuff, or they listened to it, but like they came of age in another time, so they don't have the distance from like today. You know what I mean? And I think that is a huge, huge difference. Do they have the distance? Like my mom personally, as I got older and I came into knowledge myself, she was a fan of Diggable Planets or Arrested Development, or you know what I'm saying, certain kind of stuff. But she had a distance where I also heard Doug Karn and Gene Karn and Gary Bartz, you know what I mean, and Atlantic Starr and Patti LaBelle. So there was enough of a distance there of the music of her childhood had a firm distance from the music of my childhood. And sometimes when either the culture is like that, where the culture that the elders are quote unquote into is very similar to the culture of the young people. You know what I mean? Like extremely similar, if not the same. And I'm gonna say this: if you've only had between 15 and 20 years, depending on the situation, you have multiple generations of only 15 and 20 years, you are more like that next generation. Because by the time that other child is 10, you're only 30, so you're still into that music, right? You know what I mean? So that person is like, yo, no, I like that song too. Why? Because it's what's on the radio, and I'm 30 and I still listen to the radio. You know what I mean? I don't listen to the radio now. So, Messiah, he likes all kind of, he likes these like power ballads that play on Sonic the Hedgehog, power ballad that play on Sonic the Hedgehog and all these different shows he watches. So we can't like the same music at all. But you know what I'm saying? Like the generations have a lot to do with that. But
I wanted to add something. I think another component of this is in my basement I had access to hundreds of records, LPs, albums, 33s and 45s, and it was actually a game of mine to pick an album based on the cover, just going through them and pull out an album and listen to it. And that's how I began to build an awareness of certain artists as a kid. And I think, or I wonder, what not having physical copies of music will do to to the passing down of art, and also in that to generations who have not been used to playing music on a physical thing. That music is something that you access via a piece of technology versus music is a physical thing that you touch, that you know, you start it playing, and you stop it, and then you put it back in its jacket or its cover to protect it. I just wonder. Again, it's an analog thing. How do you translate an analog thing into a digital world? So I just wanted to say that.
All right. Well, we are close to an hour, and I wanted to try to keep us around that amount of time for purely technical, creative purposes that don't have any larger implications on the nature of the universe. However, so I will close with this and ask what for many of this from just a music perspective from the two brothers who we framed this conversation around, what would be a recommendation for people's enjoyment that maybe you would point folks to take a swing at, either related to either these from these as it relates to these two artists and individuals.
Well, again, for me, I think can we pretend is an incredibly melancholy, complicated song, but I think anyone listening would really, that would be a good kind of base and not start for Bill Withers, but a really interesting place to listen, that has the music kind of has connections, and also has like Jose Feliciano on guitar, which is also, I think, it kind of sounds much of the way that it does. So that would be my one for Bill Withers. And for Ellis Marsalis, actually, he had an album with his son Wynton called Joe Cool's Blues, and it was like with Snoopy as Joe Cool and Charlie Brown, and kind of the music of that, which I think for someone who's not heavy into jazz and doesn't want to listen to some Rob Pharoah Sanders, you know what I mean, that wants something kind of some
They don't go up in the atmosphere with
yeah, they want a cool intro.
Baby?
They want a cool intro. I think that would be a good one to hear. Wynton and his father actually play together.
All right. Now, Javon, you got a recommendation?
I would recommend that while people have this time, due to the global pandemic, if you can get access to the PBS special Jazz by Ken Burns, it's, I think, a 9-part documentary. I would strongly encourage people to take a gaze at those episodes and soak up the entirety of what jazz is and where it came from and how it spread as a culture and as an art form. And I mean, I would just recommend, in these days of streaming, go to each of the artists and go through their catalog and check out a couple different albums, and just skip through some of the songs. You'll find something that catches you.
All right. And I'll add, I think the promise of our current age and technology is that, within, minutes of reading about Ellis Marsalis specifically passing, one, I was able to read, but then I was able to go and find, performances from, I guess it's from like the Heritage Center and Art Center down in New Orleans, and him with other local artists, and find other works of his that I wouldn't, if it was 1983, I would have had to like go to a library, hope they had a copy, or ask a family member, which has its own sort of social mobility. But in this age, you can, if you have access, if you have the privilege and the fortunate circumstance to have access to the tools to go search something up on most people, and at least get to hear or see some of what they did, or how they created, how they moved through the world. But as all tools, if you don't use it for that particular implementation, then you won't get that benefit. So that would be my I'm gonna have a couple links on the show notes to some stuff I just found, and I enjoyed actually. And then I was like, wow, I gotta add that to my other playlists and things so I can listen to it again because it was beautiful. Yeah, well, I want to say thank you both for joining me tonight. So here's what's gonna happen. When I stop the recording, I think it'll keep us like in the phone call or in the talking.
Okay.
So
one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we wrap up, I would like to give a strong rest in peace to Brother Jimmy Heath, who passed away sometime earlier this year. Many of us in hip hop know him or his music from the sample from the song on Nas's first album, Illmatic, One Love, or from Redman's Super Lover Part 2. Or was it Part 3? I think it was Superman Lover Part 3. And the brother passed away recently, man. He was a jazz legend. So rest in peace.
Say his name one more time.
Jimmy Heath.
Jimmy Heath, he returned that shit too?
Yeah.
Sheesh, 2020 been tough on jazz. Whew. Tough on everybody, but shit. Especially tough on jazz. 2020. Yeah. Okay, sheesh. Okay.
Yeah, 2020 trying to, anyway, let's stay focused. So with that, I'm gonna say thank you to the good brothers, and please listen in the future. Peace.